Welcome to Odd Man Out, all the news you didn't know you needed to know. Instead of cutting this from some live stream that I do over on Rumble, today I'll actually be live streaming this evening, 8 p.m. tonight, Eastern Standard Time. That's going to be the interview between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. So if you want to check that out, make sure to hop over on Rumble tonight. I'll be streaming that live over there or on betterbachelor.locals.com. So Kamala Harris announced her very first policy, and it's just copying Trump. She was giving a speech the other day, at one of her events, and she's notoriously not come out with a bunch of policies yet. If you go to her policy page on her website, it's just for fundraising. She doesn't have any policies. She's yet to do any meaningful interviews, or now that I think about it, any interviews at all with any media since her announcement for running. She's just gone up on stage, had some performers, and given a little bit of a speech. So she came out and her last rally that she had, and I'll say this: if you don't hate the media, then you're mentally deficient. And if you do hate the media, you don't hate the media enough, because they spin everything so hard in favor for the Democrats that between the media and everybody else that goes against conservatives, it's a wonder the conservatives can even win anything based on just how hard the media shills for the Democrats. Here's a great example. This is from Newsweek. Kamala Harris's tax proposal is backed by the majority of Republicans. That's the headline. Now, a lot of people don't read articles. They're just scrolling through the news, and they read the headlines, and they never dive into the article. This is a great example of how the media can tell the truth, or more accurately, they can be telling the truth but still lying to you. So the headline, Kamala Harris tax proposal backed by a majority of Republicans. What's the truth of it if you read it? The majority of Americans support plans to end federal taxes on tips given to service industry workers, according to an exclusive poll for Newsweek, which shows why Kamala Harris embraced the policy plan first announced by her opponent, President Trump. Or Donald Trump, they say. They wouldn't call him president because they hate him. And then they have a survey. And so, hey, they said, you know what? A lot of people support this, so we're going to do it too. From CNN, Harris endorses eliminating taxes on tips, touting policy first proposed by Trump. At least that's an honest headline. They say Vice President Kamala Harris has backed the elimination of taxes on tips for hospitality and service workers, endorsing a policy first suggested by former President Donald Trump. Harris' supports came ahead of an economic plan rollout this week, and it also comes as the vice president seeks to coalesce support from stabilized coalition of service industry workers in the key battleground state of Nevada. Now, I'll tell you the most ironic part of this, and this is the part that I think makes me the maddest. President Kamala, or VP Kamala Harris, might as well be President Kamala Harris at this point, and Joe Biden actually signed a bill giving the IRS more money and more agents to track tips. Do you remember when they came out and they said any money exchange, any payment transfer of anything over $600 will be taxed or will be subject to investigation for tax? So if I bought a bicycle for a friend of mine and I transferred anything more than $600 to purchase the bike, that could be taxed. Where in the past, that wasn't really anything that was taxed because it was a private transaction. They keep ramping up more and more taxes and then are surprised when people get angry. And so the government comes out and says, well, we'll just increase minimum wage, which forces all other wages up, which forces more inflation, which forces you to pay more taxes. But it means the money you're giving the government is worth less because of the inflation. It's an endless cycle of just ramping and ramping up without ever fixing anything. Here's the bill that they mention. And this was written yesterday in response to her saying she was going to now not tax tips. Vice President Kamala Harris, who on Sunday copied a campaign promise first announced by former President Donald Trump to eliminate taxes on tips, voted in 2022 to pass legislation that allowed the IRS to track down workers' tips so they could be taxed. On August 7th, 2022, Harris cast the tie-breaking vote to pass the Inflation Reduction Act that provided $80 billion in additional funding to the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, which then got to work cracking down on the service industry's reporting of tips so they could be taxed. 2 years ago today, I proudly cast the tie-breaking vote to pass our Inflation Reduction Act. Harris's Facebook account reminded the public on Wednesday, sharing a video of the vice president voting to pass the legislation. On this vote, the yeas are 50, the nays are 50, which was right down party lines just about. The Senate being equally divided, the vice president votes in the affirmative and the bill is amended as passed. Harris said in the August 7th, 2022 video. President Joe Biden's White House also boasted that the Inflation Reduction Act provided $80 billion in additional funding to the IRS. So not only did they go ahead and give $80 billion to the IRS, which is a heck of a lot of money, they said they were using it to go after the wealthiest. But that's not true. They're going after the people that are the industry workers. Because if you went to Elon Musk and all the other billionaires, Jeff Bezos, the rest of them, and tax them into the dirt, that's not even $1 trillion. That would not fix our deficit at all. But if you go after 315 or however many taxpayers we have, I guess maybe 150 million people, and can charge them each $100, $200, $500, $1,000 more, that's going to add up to a lot more than the billionaires, and they can do it for much longer. In February 2023, the IRS released a proposed revenue procedure known as the Service Industry Tip Compliance Agreement, or the SITCA program. The agency describes SITCA as a voluntary tip reporting program between the IRS and employers in various service industries that would include monitoring of employer compliance based on actual annual tip revenue and charged tip data from an employer's point of sale system, and allowance for adjustments in the tipping practices from year to year. There's no reason they'd be issuing guidance on how to crack down on this if it was only going to end up being voluntary, Americans for Tax Reform's Mike Palitz told Fox News at the time. Ultimately, the goal is to go and grab as much revenue as possible from wherever they can. They told us they're not going to be coming after people earning $400,000 or less. Palitz added, well, here's a new IRS rule that's focused on bringing in tips from waitresses. Palitz also took to X to express his dismay, writing, these 87,000 new IRS agents that you were promised would only target the rich, they're coming after waitresses' tips now. And he gives a link to the IRS.gov page. IRS introduces new service industry tip reporting procedure. He said it's obvious the IRS hired 87,000 new agents to only target the rich. Entrepreneur Patrick Bet-David reacted, bad policies have consequences. The IRS, they just announced that they want to start tracking all of the tips that workers earn so they can be taxed for it. And remember, this is all part of Biden's so-called Inflation Reduction Act. As Reasons magazine reported in 2023, the White House touted the legislation's $80 billion in new funding for the IRS, claiming it would make our tax code fairer by cracking down on millionaires and billionaires and corporations that evade the obligations. It now appears that some of those resources will, quite predictably, be aimed at individuals earning considerably less. The magazine noted, adding that as a result, the Treasury Department and IRS announced plans to overhaul existing programs that track tips earned by service sector workers, citing the IRS's new SITCA program. More than likely, the way that they're going to do this, and I have a video clip from Jean-Pierre here, the world's worst press secretary. I have a clip from her. The problem is that if you've just spent almost $100 billion to crack down on these tips, and you've hired all these agents, is Kamala Harris, if she gets into office, is she really going to backtrack? No. Are they going to fire all these agents and give the $80 billion of taxpayer money back to the coffers to maybe reduce or slow down the money printers? No. So what is it? It's a lie. The Democrats will say and do anything at this point to get into office. That's all there is to it. And then once they're in office, they'll backtrack. Because I do believe if over the next 4 years they can pack up and get the Senate and the House and the presidency, I think that's it. I think they're going to revise so many laws and so many freedoms that is going to turn this country on its head. And I have zero doubt of that. Would they go so far as to also kind of fortify things to make sure that they get the presidency and the House and the Senate? I really wouldn't doubt it, if I'm to be honest. Let me play this by Karine Jean-Pierre, world's worst press secretary, about her feeling and the official Biden White House statement on it.
Thanks, Karine. Over the weekend, Vice President said she followed former President Donald Trump in saying she would support a proposal that would not tax tipped wages. If similar bill made its way to the President of the United States, President Biden, would he sign that proposal? That's something he's embraced before.
Oh, absolutely. Look, this is something that the president supports. He supports eliminating taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers while also raising minimum wage and preventing the wealthy from gaining the system. And if you think about what the president has talked about the last 3.5 years, making sure that we have an economy that works for all, not leave.
She just gave it away. Because if you listen very carefully, she said,
absolutely. Look, this is something that the president supports. He supports eliminating taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers while also raising minimum wage. While raising minimum wage. That's not going to work. We saw what happened in California. If you bring up the prices of the lowest paid workers, the minimum wage is not designed to be a livable wage. It's not designed to be. But the Democrats are so focused on making the minimum wage a livable wage that it will completely trash the system. You will get hyperinflation, not only from wages going up. And so once again, as I've mentioned many times, if you're a fast food worker and you demand $30 an hour for your minimum wage, then somebody that's now a $30 an hour worker wants 60. Someone that was 60 wants 100. Someone that's 100 wants 200. Everything gets inflated. You add that to the money printer, you add that to the interest rates, it will financially collapse the United States. And the Biden administration has talked multiple times about introducing a tax that would be on held goods when they talk about taxing the rich. And the way that they would implement it is basically going to somebody like Elon Musk or somebody else that's wealthy, but even take somebody that's worth $1 million. It doesn't have to be a lot. And they go forward and they say, hey, you have $100 billion of stocks, unrealized capital gain. We're going to come after that. So if they do that, they'll look at Musk and they say, you have $100 billion of asset value. We want 10% of that. Okay, but I haven't cashed anything. I haven't sold anything. It's just sitting there. And they say, we want our 10% on it. So now he has to liquidate 10% of what he owns, selling that stock to pay the government. And then next year, and the next year, and the next year. What happens if you have $1 million home? Which you might say, well, that's a lot of money. Not anymore when the average house now costs you $400,000 and some odd thousand to buy. What if you buy that $500,000 home? You pay the interest on it. You pay the taxes on it. You now own that home, and it's worth $500,000 now. And they come out and they say, okay, you owe 10% of unrealized capital gains. That home is worth $500,000. We want 10% of that because it's worth $500,000. You haven't sold it yet, but you have that value. That is how everything comes apart. And if you think that's a step too far, go dig around a little bit. You'll see the Biden administration has talked about that. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can find it. Here's the story right here from April 25th of 2024. Biden proposes 25% tax on unrealized gains for high net worth individuals. What do you think the high net would be when they need more money? And they need more money. That high net individual will continue to come down lower and lower. They say in the U.S., billionaires pay a significantly smaller portion of their wealth in taxes than ordinary Americans contribute from their wages. See, that's the first lie. They say of their wealth, So if Elon Musk, he famously, I think 2 years ago, said he had to sell, and it's not about Elon Musk. It's just I happen to know Elon's finances because I'm on Twitter and I see him post about this stuff. He cashed out and moved a lot of money. He had to pay $6 billion in taxes. And according to most statistics, 1% or the top 1% of income earners pay something like 50 or 70% of all the taxes. So now, as they say here, Biden wants to address this imbalance with newly revealed budget for fiscal year 2025. If you go to Elon Musk and say, okay, you're worth $100 billion, we want 25% of what your value is, your worth is, not of what you sold, not of what you have cashed out, but just what you own. Do you realize what that would do to the stock market? And so what would have to probably happen is an individual like Elon Musk would have to make a corporation called the Elon Musk Company where he just stores his money to protect it from the government. And then what if the government says, well, we're going to do this to corporations too? You're going to go to BlackRock, Vanguard, say, hey, you guys are worth $13 trillion. We want 25% of that this year and next year and next year. It's never enough. So don't believe them. Don't believe them when they say, oh, well, we're not going to come. We're going to leave the tips alone. We're only going to tax the richest. We're going after the billionaires and millionaires. They're going to destroy the country. And if they get in for the next 4 years, I think they're going to raise the basic income, or they're going to raise minimum wage. They're going to be money printing like crazy. They're going to be taxing everybody like crazy. And you're going to see it all fall apart. And one of the reasons why they're going to have to collect so much in taxes and raise the minimum wage is because under Harris, the border is going to stay open. We are going to be hyper flooded with people. You think it was bad for the last 4 years, it'll probably double that. I see nothing but collapse under this administration. So be aware, she's lying once again, but she's decided to steal Trump's idea. And the worst part is she's not actually going to come through with it. They're just going to tear it all down in the meantime. And these are just pretty words to get into office so they can destroy the country at this point.